May 1940 was supposed to be quiet. After months of the phony war, British and French troops crouched behind concrete and confidence. Neville Chamberlain told the Commons on April 4, 1940, that Hitler had missed the bus. Papers ran the line. People nodded along. 3 days later, Germany swallowed Denmark and Norway as a warm-up. On May 10th, the real performance began. Dawn, Fall Gelb, Case Yellow, detonated across the map. 141 German divisions tore into Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg. This wasn't 1914's mud and inches. It was blitzkrieg. Stuka sirens like knives, panzers driving 50 miles a day. Radio reports obsolete before they reached the next room. The Maginot Line, a $3 billion palace of concrete, underground rail, air-conditioned barracks, turrets that rose and sank like stage props, guarded the wrong wall. The French High Command had decided the Ardennes was a tank-proof thicket. On May 13th, German armor burst out of those impenetrable trees and crossed the Meuse at Sedan, the same wound France had suffered in 1870. History, with its dark humor, had come back for a repeat. Within a week, a steel wedge split the British Expeditionary Force from the main French armies. Nearly 400,000 British and French were being herded toward the Channel. Refugees choked every lane. Headquarters read reports aloud that described positions already gone. In Berlin, glasses clinked. Intelligence estimates said Britain would sue for peace 3 weeks after France fell. 4 at the outside. What else could happen? The BEF would be smashed. The Royal Navy couldn't stop tanks. Britain lacked the men and mills to stand alone. Surrender wasn't just predicted, it was assumed. And at Westminster, a different collapse was underway. A government falls. While armies break the Norway debate, May 78 was meant to be a post-mortem. It became an execution. Leo Amery, a conservative, stood and flung Oliver Cromwell's line across the aisle. "You have sat too long here for any good you have been doing. In the name of God, go." The chamber erupted. When the division bells stopped, Chamberlain still had a technical majority, but had lost the meaning of one. The country was not with him. He tried to stitch a coalition together. Labour and the Liberals refused to serve under the man of Munich. 2 names remained: Lord Halifax, the Foreign Secretary, patrician, measured, the establishment's favourite, and Winston Churchill, First Lord of the Admiralty. Brilliant, mercurial, scarred by Gallipoli, a party crosser who had spent the 1930s in the wilderness shouting that Hitler was coming while the nation called him a warmonger. On May 9th, in a small room with too much history, Chamberlain asked Halifax if he would take it on. Halifax hesitated. He later said the House of Lords made it impractical to lead a war government. Historians have argued he also lacked the stomach to steer Britain through likely defeat. Sometimes the decision not to grasp a thing decides everything. At 6 p.m., May 10th, 1940, as German armour exploded across the Low Countries, King George VI sent for Churchill. The 65-year-old wrote later, "I felt as if I were walking with destiny, and that all my past life had been but a preparation for this hour and for this trial." Drama, yes, but then disaster had earned it. Churchill formed a war cabinet with speed and cunning. He kept Chamberlain as Lord President of the Council to hold the party. He made Clement Attlee, Labour leader, Lord Privy Seal, and brought the trade unions inside the tent by appointing Ernest Bevin Minister of Labour. Halifax remained Foreign Secretary. Unity wasn't optics. If Britain was to live, every stratum had to pull. While portfolios were being handed out, the map kept breaking. The Dutch Queen fled to London. The Belgians fell back across every front. French commanders sent messages that were less reports than pleas. And the question that thumped behind every minute was brutally simple. What do we do when France falls? The war cabinet's near surrender. Between May 26th and May 28th, the five-man war cabinet met 9 times. Those rooms decided the century. Halifax's plan was elegant in the way poison often is. Italy had not yet entered the war. Let Mussolini mediate a settlement. Not surrender, of course. Halifax never said the vulgar word. But terms. Recognize Germany's control of the continent. Preserve the British Empire and Navy in exchange for neutrality. Realism, he called it. France was going. The BEF was trapped. Why fight on to national suicide? Churchill exploded. He saw what Halifax would not. Negotiation would begin at our lowest point and continue downward. Disarmament, neutrality while Hitler consolidated. The Royal Navy shackled or handed over. Each concession the mother of another. On May 26th, he told the cabinet, nations which went down fighting rose again, but those which surrendered tamely were finished. Chamberlain wavered, ill and tired, but still influential. Attlee and Arthur Greenwood backed Churchill, but they were junior partners in a Tory room. At one point, Churchill left, furious, exhausted. Halifax considered resigning, which would have detonated the government and likely forced negotiations. On May 28th, Churchill did something unprecedented. He summoned the full cabinet, all 25 ministers. He spoke without varnish about fighting on, about never surrendering, about how even if Britain went down, it would go down fighting. The response? Table banging, men crossing the room to clap him on the back, was the turning of the tide. Halifax could not drag a united cabinet into talks. The line was drawn. Britain would fight. The country never knew how close it came to a different sentence. Parliament didn't know. Berlin didn't know. Had Halifax prevailed, there would have been no British base for D-Day, no Allied bombing campaign, no Second Front. The Soviet Union would have faced the Reich alone. Blood, toil, tears, and sweat. 3 days after becoming Prime Minister, May 13, 1940, Churchill stood in the Commons with a speech scrawled between crises. 6 minutes. No embroidery. I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. Politicians do not usually campaign on suffering. He did. We have before us an ordeal of the most grievous kind. Many, many long months of struggle and of suffering. No soft focus. Then the purpose. You ask, what is our policy? I will say, it is to wage war by sea, land and air, against a monstrous tyranny never surpassed in the dark, lamentable catalogue of human crime. Not for colonies nor prestige, against tyranny. The closer. You ask, what is our aim? I can answer in one word. Victory. For without victory, there is no survival. That word, survival, dragged the sublime down to the kitchen table. He wasn't selling triumph. He was selling the chance to live. The Times called it grim. Some MPs muttered about defeatism, but beyond the spin, something clarified. There would be no negotiations. The BBC carried the words. Tube stations that would soon be dormitories passed papers hand to hand. Soldiers at the coast read them between orders to fall back. In Berlin, analysts stopped smiling. Why Germany misread. Britain-German intelligence thought it knew this island. The files stacked high with proof. The 1930s had been appeasement. Munich, the Rhineland, Austria, each met with paper and caution. The Oxford Union had once passed a resolution against fighting for king and country. The British upper classes admired order and profit. Surely they would prefer terms to ruin. Halifax himself seemed to validate the forecast. Churchill, a waspish relic. 65, a drinker, a romantic with a ledger of fiascos. The conclusion was neat. It was also wrong, catastrophically. Appeasement had bought steel and Spitfires, but it had purchased something else too, disillusion. Each broken promise had taught the British public that Hitler's word was air. By May 1940, even those who had prayed for peace knew peace with Hitler was impossible. And when France began to fall, the choice sharpened to a razor. Fight alone or cease to exist as a sovereign nation. Binary choices simplify politics. Class, party, position rearranged themselves around survival. Dunkirk, disaster and deliverance. By May 26th, the BEF and Allied units, over 400,000 men, were corralled against the sea at Dunkirk. German armor on 3 sides, Luftwaffe overhead. General Alan Brooke wrote, "Nothing but a miracle can save the BEF." The miracle received a code name, Operation Dynamo. Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay, from tunnels under Dover Castle, had 2 days and a destroyed harbor. The initial estimate, perhaps 45,000, could be lifted before the trap shut. About 40 destroyers were available. The arithmetic was pitiless. Then Hitler issued the Halt Order, May 24th. Reasons remain argued. Goering's boast that the Luftwaffe could finish the job, conserving tanks for the drive south, a calibrated show of restraint to butter negotiations. Whatever the motive, the pause gave the British 48 hours to throw up a perimeter. It still wouldn't be enough. Dunkirk's quays were wrecked. Big ships could not reach the beaches. Men waited in the dunes under shell and Stuka. Ramsay made the desperate call for small boats, anything that floated and could cross the channel. Fishing boats, river ferries, private yachts. Tamzine, a 14-foot fishing boat, somehow managed 7 soldiers. Sundowner made trips and brought back 130 men. Over 9 days, May 26th to June 4th, an armada of 933 vessels, about 700 of them small ferried soldiers, from sand to deeper draft ships. The RAF flew 3,500-plus sorties. 6 destroyers were sunk, 19 damaged. Oil slicks thickened the sea until men climbed aboard black with it. The final tally stunned everyone. 338,226 evacuated, 198,229 British, 139,997 French and Belgian. The Germans captured or killed around 68,000 and took 40,000 prisoners. They had expected all. It was still a defeat. 65,000 vehicles, 76,000 tons of ammunition were abandoned. 11 fighter squadrons gone. Churchill told Parliament on June 4th, "Wars are not won by evacuations." But propaganda is not arithmetic. The little ships became legend. The perimeter had held. Most importantly, Britain still had an army. Flesh can be re-equipped. We shall fight. On the afternoon the last boats left, June 4th, 1940, Churchill rose again. He gave the Commons the plain story of failure. Breakthrough, encirclement, retreat, air cover that cost pilots their lives. He praised the French who held the line so others could go. He refused to paint disaster as victory. We must be very careful not to assign to this deliverance the attributes of a victory. Then he did the alchemy. He converted defeat into defiance. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans, with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. The drumbeats moved inland. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches, on the landing grounds, in the fields and in the streets, in the hills. We shall never surrender. He even added the quiet contingency. If the island fell, which I do not for a moment believe, the Empire and fleet would carry on until, in God's good time, the New World steps forth to the rescue. A message to Roosevelt as much as to Hitler. For the public, a rallying cry. For Parliament, the final spike through negotiation. For Berlin, a shock. Dunkirk, which should have shattered resolve, had hardened it. Intelligence assessments had not accounted for a people who, told the truth, prefer it to comfort. France falls. The offer that never came. On June 22nd, France surrendered in the same railway car where Germany had signed its humiliation in 1918, Hitler's theater at its cruelest. Western Europe lay under the swastika. The USSR was bound by a non-aggression pact. Italy had joined the feast. Britain stood alone, outnumbered in the air and stripped of heavy kit. Hitler prepared a peace proposal. Britain could keep the empire and the navy if it recognized Germany's continent. He thought it generous. He waited for the approach. None came. On July 14th, Bastille Day, symbolism for the file, Churchill ordered the Royal Navy to neutralize the French fleet at Mercy-el-Kebir to keep it from German hands. Over 1,200 French sailors died. A horror and an unmistakable telegram to Berlin and Washington. We are fighting on. On July 16th, Hitler issued Directive Number 16. Prepare to invade. Operation Sea Lion would require air superiority first. The Royal Navy could not be risked. Barges would cross only under a Luftwaffe roof. So the Battle of Britain began. The few and the fatal error. July bled into August and September. The Luftwaffe hit airfields, radar masts, factories. Young RAF pilots flew 4-5 sorties a day. Some squadrons lost half their men in a week. Production struggled. By early September, Fighter Command crouched on the edge of collapse, 466 pilots killed or too wounded to fly. A few more weeks might end the story. Then Hitler blinked. On September 7th, in rage at a pinprick RAF raid on Berlin and with an eye for terror, he switched from smashing airfields to smashing London. The Blitz began. It killed over 40,000 civilians and left scars in brick that the sun still finds, but it gave Fighter Command the space it needed. Concrete can be poured. Pilots can be trained. Fighters can be built. Radar kept whispering ranges the Luftwaffe couldn't silence. German pilots who bailed out over England went to camps. British pilots who lived flew again the next day. On September 17th, Sea Lion was postponed indefinitely. The invasion that had felt like a date became a ghost. Germany had won every campaign and lost the only war that mattered, the war of will. Why Churchill's words? Worked. It wasn't magic. It was clarity. Churchill told people the truth and gave it a purpose. He offered not hope, exactly, but meaning. This matters. You matter. Endure, because endurance is the thing itself. German intelligence had counted on class fracture, on weariness from 1914-18, on a political elite that would choose property over principle. It missed how war changes nations. Munich taught, Norway taught, Dunkirk taught. By June, rationality, in the narrow sense of minimizing immediate losses, had become a luxury Britain could not afford. Refusing to lose became policy. The 3 weeks that determined the war returned to those meetings, May 26-28th, and reckon what almost happened. If Halifax had tipped the scales, there is no Battle of Britain, no Blitz endured, no beacons to the resistance, no Atlantic Partnership, no June 6, 1944. A continental empire stretches from Brest to the Bug. The USSR faces it alone. America stays at sea. Churchill won that argument not with tanks, but with sentences and the grim, necessary courage to say no to the logic of surrender. Survive first, plan victory later. Sometimes that is the only strategy that matters. The shock in Berlin. In German offices, men raised on staff rides and cost-benefit read translations and frowned. Where was the peace note? Where was Halifax? Instead, they found a prime minister promising to burn his own house rather than hand over the keys. The proposition they had bet on, Britain as a pragmatic empire that would cut a deal, had met a different country. They had misread a people who, when told, "Without victory, there is no survival," decided survival was price enough to pay for victory. Coda, the spring that was supposed to be quiet, became a season when everything spoke at once. Guns, engines, radios, newspapers, and finally a voice at a dispatch box that refused to bargain with fate. The German timetable said weeks. Churchill's first speeches said years, and years came, hard and hungry, and were met. When historians draw the thick line of the 20th century, they pause over May 1940. They mark a small room where a cabinet chose defiance. A short speech that told a nation the worst and asked for the best. A harbor full of small boats. A summer sky cross-hatched with contrails. A capital burning and unbowed. They note a miscalculation in Berlin that changed the war's math. That a people offered purpose will do almost anything to keep it. Sometimes refusing to lose is more important than knowing how you'll win. Britain learned that. Germany learned it the hard way. And the world, which keeps betting that democracies will choose comfort, was reminded that comfort is not what free people are for.